Hi everybody, so my name is Gabriel, founder of Bamboo Builders. Thank you for joining us today. So just a brief background of Bamboo Builders. So we actually started in 2017 as a social enterprise to empower young adults to create change in their community as social entrepreneurs. So since then, we have actually started in rural Vietnam and moved on to Myanmar. And started 4 businesses along the way to empower the rural schools in those areas. So in this year, we actually started coming to Singapore to propose our programs to schools over here, create social enterprises locally. So without further ado, I'm very excited for the event later on. Just want to thank you again for joining us. Stay tuned.
Hi everyone, welcome to Bamboo Builders' 4th Community Huddle, Poverty Through Social Lens. My name is Shamin and I'll be your host for today. A little background about Bamboo Builders is that we are an educational social enterprise that empowers confident leaders to become social entrepreneurs, creating ripples of change throughout ASEAN. We believe that many young people want to create a change but don't know where or how to begin because they are unexposed. As such, we hope that today's huddle can provide as a platform for like-minded people to mingle and form partnerships to help tackle poverty together. I believe that many of us are still feeling from the effects of COVID-19. Social distancing, wearing masks whenever we leave the house, and working from home. Some love working from home, while others really want to go back to the office. Amidst all this online chatter, there's many others who have it far worse, suffering from the lack of income due to unemployment, and we may not even see them on social media because they had their internet access cut off, because they could not afford to pay their bills. Do you notice them? And if so, what do you do? As such, today, we are very honored and privileged to have with us 4 speakers who have experience working with people living in social poverty to share with us their journeys and stories. In order of sharing, we have Ms. Juliana Johan, co-founder of the Affirmative People, followed by Dr. Harry Tan, researcher and sociologist presenting on elderly homelessness in Singapore, followed by Ms. Fannie Lim, Deputy Executive Director of Daughters of Tomorrow. Last but not least, we have Mr. Gabriel Tan, founder of Bamboo Builders. After this sharing session, we'll have a short Q&A session. Feel free to leave your questions in the question box found on our Instagram page or in our comment section below, where our speakers will answer them individually in the next few videos. Without further ado, we'll have Ms. Juliana Johan, where she will be sharing more about the Affirmative People and the insights she has gained from the field. Juliana, please.
So hi, team of Bamboo Builders. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. So today I would like to share with you the distinction between helping and empowering. I believe that all of us here have a beautiful heart. They want to serve people. But really, there's a difference between helping and empowering in a sense that helping is when we really feel good helping others. But empowering is really to effectively create change in the lives of others, to really help them impactfully. So why do I say that? Let me give you an example. So let's see from the perspective of a senior in poverty. So last year, I had the privilege of bringing Uncle Sam to the hospital for his annual checkup. Not really annual checkup, it's just his regular checkup. So he's a cancer patient, and he has his leg is very bluish. And in the doctor's office, the doctor was just examining him and looking at his leg. And he was telling the doctor how his leg has been very painful for him. Every bump that he makes on the wheelchair is very excruciatingly painful for him. And then so the doctor was taking a look, and the doctor was telling him about the tumor in his leg, that he needs surgery. And the doctor asked him, is there any questions that you have? And then Uncle Sam looked at the doctor and he said something like, doctor, susah nak pergi toilet. It means that susah in Malay is difficult. That means he's having constipation. So the doctor asked him, do you use the bullet? And then he said yes. Then do you take the liquid medication that I gave you the last time? He said yes. So the doctor said, okay, never mind. I'll give you a stronger medication, and then we see how your constipation will ease off after that. So we tagged the doctor, and then I started to wheel him out of the doctor's room. While waiting for the confirmation of his next appointment, I asked Uncle Sam, do you want some water to drink? Then Uncle Sam said, no, I don't want to pee because diapers very expensive, And that's when I asked him, Uncle Sam, what do you eat for breakfast? And then Uncle Sam said, oh, I ate biscuits. These past few days, auntie hasn't been feeling well. She has been sleeping a lot, so she got no time to cook, no energy to cook. So that's why I've been eating biscuits all this time. So do you see the difference between helping and empowering? The doctor earlier, he wants to help people, but he's not really empowering the senior to make better decisions, to take charge of their health. If only he had asked the senior, Uncle Sam, what has he been eating, what has he been drinking, then the problem of constipation can easily be resolved. So then on the way home, the uncle was sitting behind, my partner was driving, and Uncle Sam was whispering at the back of the seat, is there any problem if we share medication? And then I looked at him. What medication are you sharing? Then he said, auntie has been feeling pain. So much pain that she has been taking my morphine medication also. She has been drinking it every day, and she really think that it's good for her pain. Then I was like telling the uncle, no, I cannot share medication like that. You have cancer, that's why they give you morphine. But people without cancer, I cannot anyhow take the morphine even if they have pain. So now that is why the auntie has been feeling groggy all this while. For people in poverty, especially for seniors, the sense of self-care, the knowledge is not there. No doubt they may not have the means to self-care in terms of the nutrition, emotional and psychological wellness, but really, it has been an area where it's most neglected. The knowledge is really not there. And people who help them sometimes may not intentionally do it, but sometimes by giving like rations such as instant noodles, chili sauce, soya sauce, this is not helping them to get better health. So come down to what can we do? Yeah, so this is the hospital. Yeah, so this is Madam Sutia. She's a hospice patient. And as a hospice patient, we try as much as possible to make them feel better about their health, or about their, not really about their health, but about their life. So what she wanted to do was to really see the beach, go to the seaside before she passed on. So that's what we did. We went to the park and pushed her on the wheelchair, have a stroll on the park. And then she saw some cyclists. And then the cyclists, then she said something like, when I was young, I could really feel freedom when I was cycling away and there's wind in my face. So I turned around to the nurse and the social worker, said, can we do that for her? And then the nurse and social worker got very excited. They comes back to the hospice and asked for permission. So that's what we did. We hopped onto the van and go to the rental kiosk and rented this bicycle, family bicycle, and put her in the middle as we cycle along. She could really feel the wind in her face, and she was very grateful for the experience. So I sat with Madam Sutia at the hospice a few days, like a few weeks before she passed on. And what happened was I was writing down the pearls of wisdom that she had in life so that we can share with people. And like how Uncle Sam, to him, even going toilet is a luxury. For Madam Sutia, even to eat is a luxury. She was reminding all of us that, be grateful that you have the ability to eat, because you never know when you can ever eat again. And then she also reminded us about the beauty of human imagination. She told us that next time when you look at things, really marvel at human imagination, how people can create things and start creating things. And then in her memoir, she mentioned something that she wants to know about her. That's where it struck me that, especially for people in poverty, especially seniors, they want to be of value. But those people who have been taking menial jobs all the time, their value is not really being acknowledged by a lot of people. So how can we be in a position of empowerment? How can we empower them so that they can have greater self-worth and have, create value in their life, really distill down their wisdom and pass it on to the next generation? So here I would like to share with you one tip. For example, if you want to help someone, really slow down and understand who are you helping. It's not only in a position where you want to help the person because the person is helpless in some ways, but really sit down and think about what are the 5 things that you respect about the person, be it his resilience, his wisdom, or also the 5 things that he brings value into this world. How has he been bringing value into this world? And if you cannot find the answers, then we really have no right to help them, because then it's just looking at them as helpless victims, and that will not be of any good. So for example, in the Facilitators Project, an organization that we set up to empower abused and neglected children and women in shelters, what we did was we had arranged for intergenerational sharing, intergenerational interactions with them. So 2 years ago, we did a Halloween party where we identify the seniors that are living alone in their homes within the neighborhood. And then we went around knocking on those seniors' houses with all these kids. And these kids dress up just to cheer the seniors up. But at the same time, before that, what we did was we prepacked candy bars and gifts for the kids and put it at every senior's house. And then for the kids, every kid, we have a box of chicken essence for them to give to the seniors. So by doing that, during this initiative, we empower both the kids, the abused kids in the shelters, as well as the seniors to be in a position of giving rather than just receiving. So all it takes is a bit of creativity in our initiatives to really empower people to be of value. So then I'd like to end off by really reminding people of the need for self-worth and self-care in people that we are serving, and to really admire their strength and resilience rather than just looking at them as victims. So with that, thank you very much. And So Bamboo Builders, you can have it.
Thank you, Juliana, for the heartwarming stories. The one thing that has really caught my attention was, what do we see value in people? And if we don't see, it just means that we're actually seeing them as helpless people, right? Yeah. So I think that's one thing that I'll take away from your sharing session. It was very insightful. So next up, we'll have Dr. Harry Tan, a researcher and sociologist, where he'll be sharing more about the homelessness in Singapore and how we can end it. Harry, please.
Thank you, Shamin. So I just want to give a little bit of a background into long-term homelessness in Singapore. So in 2019, a nationwide count was actually done for the number of rough sleepers that we have in Singapore. It was led by Professor Ng Kok Ho. So I'm not sure if you know of this count, but it was reported in the newspaper. And we found about 1,000 people sleeping in public spaces in Singapore. There are a lot of findings in that study, but one of the findings really stood out. And the finding that stood out was this: of those people who was willing to be surveyed, half actually reported sleeping rough for more than 1 year. And 1/3 actually said that they slept rough for more than 6 years. And they actually even have 4 persons saying that they slept rough for more than 20 years. So this actually amounts to about 50% in that study of people who are considered long-term homelessness. By long-term homelessness, what we really mean is people who have actually slept rough for more than 1 year. In my own study, which is my PhD study, almost every one of the older person I spoke to have slept rough for more than 1 year. So actually almost everyone is a long-term homeless person, with a few of them sleeping rough for more than 30 years. So with that background, I want to tell two stories today. And given today's topic on poverty, what I really want to do is to link these two stories to the topic of this huddle. So I'll begin with the first story. The first story, if you look at this slide over here, you see the guy in the center of the picture with, I think it's a white shirt, but I had to, I can't really show you their faces, but let's call him Alec. So Alec was a single Chinese man in his early 50s. He first became homeless in 2009 when his uncle decided not to let him stay in the house. What happened? Actually, Alec had moved into his uncle's flat after his father met with a fatal accident. His father was ran over by a lorry on his way home from work one night. Before that fatal accident, Alec and his father actually lived and rented in a public rental flat from the government. The family was never rich. His father mainly did odd jobs. Alec lived with his father only because his mom actually died giving birth to him. Without his father, Alec could not afford the rent of the rental flat on his own. He was 46 years old then and working as a cleaner. Before that, Alec used to work in different factories, but he was already suffering from seizures. He had this condition since young, which made his job quite challenging, or made working quite challenging. Can you imagine, you're working halfway and you get seizures? So eventually, Alec could not work as a cleaner as well because his condition worsened. As I mentioned just now, Alec became homeless in 2009. In 2011, Alec was picked up by the authorities, by the government, was sleeping outside and sent to a welfare home. That welfare home is in Buangkok. It is called Angsana Home. He was released from the welfare home in 2013 and went back to sleep on the streets. So when Alec was sleeping rough, or when he was sleeping outside, he slept at this flyover that you're seeing now. This is a flyover at Rocho, or this is a bridge at Rocho, over Rocho River. It is called Crawford Bridge, some of you may know it. So where did he sleep? He slept in between those pillars that you are looking at in the picture. After 2 months of sleeping rough, and here I'll let Alec continue the story and I'll quote him. So I quote, "I was sleeping there for less than 2 months when I befriended a trishaw rider. I saw that he meant no harm, and then he asked me if I have a place to stay. I told him no, and he said, come, I'll introduce a friend to you." So he introduced a partner, or a flatmate for Alec in another public rental flat. Alec basically after that stayed in that rental flat and he got out of homelessness. So that's the first story about a long-term homeless person who has gotten out of homelessness. But that's his story, all right? I'll move on to the second story. So this story is about Ganesh and the challenges he faced as a long-term homeless person. I'm going to share two poignant interactions I had with Ganesh. And I'm going to read a little bit from what I wrote down when I was a researcher on the field of my interaction with Ganesh. So actually the open air pavilion that you see here is very typical of any open air pavilion that you find in any HDB estate. So this actually is the place where I first met Ganesh, and it was in 2014. At that time, I was a volunteer. I haven't started any research on homelessness yet. What happens at night? I'll read a little bit from the notes that I jotted down. So Ganesh was telling me, hey, I heard of WeCare. WeCare is a day drop-in center for recovering addicts. You can be addicted to any kind of substance, or as long as you're an addict, you can drop in, or a recovering addict, you can actually drop in at this drop-in center. I'll have a picture of WeCare in the next slide, but I'll come to that later. So Ganesh was telling me that he used to attend the anger management course conducted by a counselor called Yvonne at WeCare. So Ganesh said, she is a very nice person. And then I told Ganesh, I know her. I know who Yvonne is. Yvonne is my mother. So both of us were very surprised by the connection, the unexpected connection. And I asked Ganesh, because he was, a bit of the background for when I first saw Ganesh. He was drinking what we call air garam, or rice wine. And he was very drunk, and he was disheveled that night. So I told him, would you like me to call my mom, or give her a call now? And he thought for a second, and then he nodded and said, okay, if you don't mind, can I speak to her? When Ganesh heard her voice, I don't know how long Ganesh had been sleeping outside when I first met him. So I have no idea. So when Ganesh heard her voice over the phone, he wept. The phone call for him was a sign that actually affirmed a decision that he had made that night, actually prior to me meeting him. And that decision was to admit himself into NAMS, National Addiction Management Services. NAMS is actually at the Institute of Mental Health. And he was going there for detox. Ganesh knew that he needed help because he had been drinking. Both his legs had swelled out. I mean, both his legs were very swollen. They were like tree trunks. Drinkers do get that problem because that's where it's a sign of weak heart as well. So that's the first incident with Ganesh. The second poignant interaction I had with Ganesh was when I was already doing my research, and I did it in Melbourne. So the second time I really interacted with Ganesh properly was after coming back, or at least when I was back here to do my research. And so I came back from Melbourne, and Ganesh was, I connected with Ganesh, and he was very happy. He said, Harry, you got to come and taste my food, because Ganesh learned how to cook in the halfway houses that he went to. And he was very proud that he wanted to cook for me. So to cut the long story short, Ganesh did not cook for me. Instead, we went to his brother's house, and his brother's wife actually cooked for us. His brother actually lived in a bungalow. So it was a very lavish setting. At the dinner itself, we got to talking and laughing, and Ganesh was very proud that of his contribution that night. Of course, he did not cook, but what he did was he brought the fresh prawns for the dinner. So he kept harping on that and said, "Hey Harry, the prawns are very fresh, And well, at the dinner, I remember something. I still remember it. So Ganesh's brother looked at him and said this, and told us, he put his arm around Ganesh and said, this younger brother of mine is a little naughty, but he has a good heart. I know he can change, and that is why I'm going to give him the keys to their mother's flat, so their late mother's flat. So the mom has passed away, and they have a HDB flat. And I remember Ganesh was smiling very shyly. So what happened? Let's fast forward maybe 4 or 5 months. That was the time I was going to go back to Melbourne, and I met up with Ganesh again. By then, Ganesh was not doing well again. What happened at the flat? What happened at the flat was this. They'd forgotten to remove some leftover alcohol in the mom's flat. And so Ganesh gave in to the temptation. And that's something that is a no-no for recovering addicts, right? That you cannot be have alcohol around you. Otherwise, it's very easy to suffer a relapse. Ganesh started drinking. The last time I met him, his legs were like tree trunks again. Not only that, once he relapsed into drinking, he also relapsed into his drugs addiction. He relapsed into taking heroin as well. A month after I went back to Melbourne, I had received news that Ganesh was arrested for shoplifting. It's not his first offense. Whenever Ganesh relapses and when his money runs out, he will shoplift to satiate his or to satisfy his cravings. When Ganesh went into prison, his elder brother changed the padlock of her mom's flat, meaning he didn't want Ganesh to go back there as a punishment. So I want to leave you with some closing thoughts. This is a picture of us celebrating Ganesh's birthday actually at WeCare at the recreation center. Let me leave you with some closing thoughts here. Maybe you can also go to the next slide. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the first story that I told you is what we normally associate poverty with. That is, actually, if you think about it, Alex's story is about income, or the lack of income, or the lack of money. The second story is not so straightforward, isn't it? What kind of poverty are we talking about here? In this case, in Ganesh's case, I would like to propose the argument that this argument. If you think of Alex's story as poverty in terms of economic poverty, meaning in terms of income, I want to propose to you that Ganesh is also poor. Ganesh's poverty is in relation to a person's capability. He can't do much. He can't go to work, right? So his poverty is a result of, a lack of capability as a result of his addictions. As such, I think the idea I really want to leave you with in my, presentation here is this. Is income in itself a good gauge of poverty? Why do I ask all of you this question? It is because if we want to find solutions to end long-term homelessness, we have to think of homelessness in all its complexities. And I've shown you a little bit of that complexity through Ganesh's story. And not just an issue of economic poverty. And so with that, I will end my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, for the stories. I think the two stories shared actually gave varying different perspectives, with one of them actually just showing that the lack of income actually leads to poverty, and that's where most of us actually are mostly aware of. Whereas for the second story, which you have shared for Ganesh, so he mentions that he's also poor, but it's because of the relation of his capabilities. And poverty for him is a result of the lack of capacity because of his addicts. So maybe that's something that the audiences can think about as well. So with that, we'll move on to our next speaker, Miss Fannie Lim, Deputy Executive Director of Daughters of Tomorrow, where she will be sharing her work with women. Fannie, please.
Thank you, Shamin, and thank you to the Bamboo Builders team for having me. Hi, I'm from Daughters of Tomorrow, and I'm so grateful to be on the same panel as Juliana and Harry. I think I learned a lot this morning from all the examples being shared. So Daughters of Tomorrow is a local charity that's helping women from the low-income community. Our mission is actually to facilitate accessible livelihood opportunities in order for her and her family to go towards a journey of social mobility. Now, they are, like what Dr. Harry mentioned earlier, there are different types of poverty, but for us, we deal with the economic version of it. And people do often ask, in glitzy Singapore, is there poverty, with all the hustle and bustle and the beautiful skyline, where are the poor? In actual fact, Singapore does not have a poverty line, but we do know that the government gives out financial assistance to families who are earning a certain level of income, which is either below, I think, 650 per capita per household, and there are more than 25,000 of such families in Singapore as well. So the women that we have been coming to Daughters of Tomorrow are usually within this profile, more than 40% of them being single mothers, a number of them being migrant mothers as well. And they usually have between this number of children, but on average it's about two children actually per household. Many having low education, which is surprising because usually we will be deemed as an educated nation. So it is quite surprising when we say, 75% of our women have secondary school qualifications or lower. And like I mentioned, these are the women from the bottom 10% of our socio-economic group in Singapore. All right. A mother's $2 dilemma. Actually, this is a video. If you go to YouTube, you can search it out under Daughters of Tomorrow YouTube channel. You can actually see that we have put up videos there to sort of share with you some of the challenges the mothers face. I will share maybe one particular story, and that has to do with when I was visiting this mother at work. We have bridged her to a part-time job in Orchard Road. So what happened was she was on a break, and then I said, are you going for your break now? Are you going to have lunch? And then she said, no, I'm just going to go to the locker room to rest. So I said, you're not hungry, or then that's when she explained to me, that day I had to decide between giving my daughter the money for recess or for lunch. So she said, of course, as a mother, most mothers would do this, including myself. I would give the money. She gave her money to her daughter, and that's why she went to take a nap in the locker room. And this was my experience earlier on. When we bridge women to jobs interviews, and then they don't show up for it. Sometimes we wonder, how come? I thought they wanted a job. Very logically, you think, okay, somebody who doesn't have money would be very, it would be a priority for them to get a job, right? So interviews are very important. Then I realized that, hey, the women are missing out on the interviews. And that's when you think, I call them, you realize that, okay, she says she doesn't have money for transport, right? So these are the very real challenges that many of these women face. Okay, so this is where things become a bit more hopeful, because I'm sure you have listened to quite a number. I mean, the challenges and the story is quite a heavy session so far. But I think we can play a part in this. I mean, there's a book that recently came out, and how about inequality by Professor Teo Yuyan, and you realize that there are great inequalities, but I think that we can all play a part. How Bamboo Builders got together this this session to sort of share with everyone what the situations are, and of course Harry and Juliana with the work that they do. Over here at DOT, how volunteers can play a part is, if you go through this few slides, we have befrienders, of course. You realize that many of these women, it's not just the challenges with having no money, it's also the relational nets. If single mothers, you realize that, hey, the social isolation is very real. So we do need a lot of befrienders to just be a friend, and I think to take on not just the helping position like what Juliana shared earlier, is actually to empower people by believing that they have this potential and they can do so much more for their own lives if given the opportunity and the tools to do so. So just by being a befriender, believing in people, being there for them. So for all our workshops that we do, we actually want to build the confidence in the women, especially because when you have faced enough setbacks in your life, you realize that you suddenly feel no good about yourself, you suddenly have low confidence, and you don't believe in yourself anymore because you think you're such a failure, right? So that's when we put them in a course, and then we go all around Singapore, and invite these women to the courses. But during that time, they come with children, and we do need people to help take care of the children, to make the causes possible for the mothers to focus on. I think we have all these different areas of volunteering and capacity building for the organization, that if you would like to come alongside, please do so, because it takes more than just one volunteer or one organization, even like DOT, or to do the work that we do. There's a lot of things that we need, because like I shared, we bridge women to the job opportunities. Where would the opportunities come from if not the employers? We do need people to befriend the women, because like I said, it's a lonely and challenging road sometimes to climb out of a difficult situation. So to have someone to rah-rah you, it's fantastic, right? So the women's journey with DOT, sometimes it's not just like a 1 month and 2 months thing. So if you are keen to volunteer, or if you are keen to do something for, the social service landscape, do come in and commit to the longer term, because like the stories being shared earlier, I'll not go into details with Rosie's story. Sometimes it's not like a 1 month and 3 month project where we can call it, sometimes there's a relapse like Ganesh's story. Sometimes it could be a long-term thing, like when it is an elderly aging. So the issues could be very multifaceted. The complexities could be, very great. So that means we do need people who are in for the long haul as well, to journey together, because if I go to the next slide, it literally takes a village. The saying is true in this aspect as well. It takes a village to raise children. It takes a village to bring one woman and one family to a better space in society. So there is an ecosystem that DOT works with, and we would collaborate all across, because we do think that this is not just we highlighted individual stories, but of course there are systemic things going around as well. So it really takes everybody's playing a part in it. This was our milestone for last year. We turned 5 years old. We ran the confidence course 11 times. We put 300 women through this job readiness process, and we had 100 women that were bridged to employment. And out of this 100 women, out of the 300 women that came into our service radar, we needed 85 active befrienders. That's why I said, we do need a lot of volunteers to bring all these women together with us as well. And this will be the final slide. This is borrowing a quote from Neil Armstrong. One step for a man is, a giant leap. That's what he said for mankind. But when I say, one small step for a woman, when you empower them, it will be a giant leap for the next generation. So thank you very much for your time and attention. Those are my contact details if you would like to know more. Thank you.
Thank you, Fannie, for the inspiring sharing about the works that you empower. That DOT actually empower women and mothers. It's actually indeed that a small step can lead a very long way, and we as volunteers, or like we as individuals, can actually take part in these changes to empower women, be it to be a befriender or just taking care of their children while the mothers are actually attending the causes. So with that, we actually move on to our last speaker, where we have Mr. Gabriel Tan, founder of Bamboo Builders, where he will be sharing his main insights gained from the field and what Bamboo Builders is trying to do. Gabriel, please.
Thank you, Charmaine. So I will now be sharing. Okay, so when we think about poverty, the poor, the destitute come to mind. And I think we can all agree that poverty is a negative thing that we all want to alleviate. And we know about this, right? The SDG goals, and the first goal on the Sustainable Development Goal is that we want as a global community to eradicate poverty. And world leaders have committed to this in 2015 at the United Nations General Assembly. And this is how we've actually defined poverty. That poverty means that we are living on less than $1.25 cents a day. So for people that are living under $1.25 a day, they are considered to be living in poverty. And then our world leaders have also committed to fighting poverty. Some of the greatest nation on earth, right? United Nations. Now maybe it's a different story, but back then, yes. So the United States has led the charge against poverty globally. If you look at this picture is actually taken from one of the rubbish slum sites in Cambodia. The impoverished really live life constantly worrying about not having enough food, shelter. There are many worries. So, for example, one of them is food. Example is water, right? Not all of them have wells. The next example would be shelter. Then the next example would be disease. And next, especially when you're fighting for your life, if you're living like on a dump site, right, like this child, you put all sorts of harmful substances into your mouth. Some of them are edible, some are not. You don't really know which is which. You can't really tell the difference, especially when everything is, there are flies everywhere, there are house flies flying everywhere, and everything is just so dirty. So these are the kinds of conditions that people in poverty live in. And actually, there's something that we use to quantify poverty, and that is money, right? I think some of the previous speakers have mentioned about it. Economic poverty. After all, poverty starts as an economic problem, right? We've defined it to be less than $1.25 a day. And so those living with more than $1.25 a day are not in poverty. But actually, who invented the economy? So these are some of the classical economists. Some of them would be familiar. You'll be familiar with. Some maybe not so much. But all of them have played an important part in shaping the economy of our world today, as well as our definition of standard of living. So in economic terms, standard of living, having a higher standard of living would result in greater happiness. So this has actually led to the materialism that we see in our world, right? And the concept of rich and poor, haves and have-nots. So these are actually created by the urban elite, right? So you can see, just look at their dressing, you can tell that they are from an urban environment, and then they are the elite, that they're dressing, they're wearing ties, they're wearing blazers, and the fact that they can even get their work published shows that they're from reputable institutions, they are learned, they're educated. And every day, because of the structures that we've placed on our world, because of the way that our economy runs, the inequality gap widens every day because of this concept that we have created. And like it or not, if you are watching this video, yes, that's us, that's you, we are in a position, we belong to this category of the urban elite. And actually, if you think about it, if unexposed to our system, the concept of poverty or of inequality would not even exist. Ultimately, in economics, the purpose of money is to purchase materials that would give us satisfaction or happiness, or some people want to be contented, right? Depends on what they argue. But yes, don't we all want to be happy when we want a higher standard of living, right? So if you look at these smiling faces, will our system of money destroy these smiles, this happiness, this sense of community, their carefree lifestyle? Look at our kids. Are they really happy? At least when they smile, like, I can't really see their teeth sometimes. So yes, just something for you to think about. In many ways, those that are living in what we term poverty are living richer more fulfilling lives than us, who then is really in poverty. So for Bamboo Builders, we actually found ourselves in a sticky situation because of this quite recent revelation. So who are we as the urban elite to tell them who are supposedly those in poverty how to live? After much pondering, this is our approach. So Bamboo Builders, we equip young adults with the entrepreneurial soft skills and mindsets to empower them to become effective change leaders in their community. These soft skills and mindsets have nothing to do with money, but important if you want to use them to start a business. So ultimately, the choice is theirs. And I think like what Juliana said earlier, that's about empowerment, isn't it? It's about giving them the choice, giving them the skills and the choice to do what they want with these new capabilities. So this is the results. In Vietnam, we started social enterprise that's selling snacks, and they were supported by Honda, VNPT, which is their largest telco, Youth Union, which is like their government organization for youth, as well as the police force. So the money that they actually earned went into the funding for an event for the traffic safety fair. We also started a socks business in Vietnam, where the proceeds went to an anti-bullying campaign in their school. So the amount that they earned actually equated to 2 years of their school fees over there. Our most recent project, the Myanmar project, we started a honey cooperative selling affordable and lightweight honey products. And they sold 1,000 honey sticks in 3 weeks. So since then, we actually progressed to selling bottles of honey already. But really the thing that binds all these new social enterprises that we started in the rural areas is that rather than just teaching them about money, we also conduct values-based education and self-awareness sessions to ensure that these newfound skills are not misused and that ultimately they are really empowered to make their own decisions. Yeah, closer to home in Singapore, we are replicating the same curriculum in schools, working with students from lower income backgrounds to create social enterprises that alleviate various indulgences in Singapore. So as you can see in the slide, this is one of the most recent social indulgences in Singapore that we've been very aware of, which is food waste. So we actually conduct programs that expose the issue of food waste and work with students to generate social enterprises to tackle such issues in society. So I think that poverty is a social construct and we are all in it together, even us living in urban settings, right? And knowing this, what will you do about it? Will you choose to ignore it, or will you choose to just talk about it, or will you actually choose to take action? So lastly, I would just like to request that you check us out on our social medias as well as on our website. We're constantly looking for people to contribute their skills to our community. We're looking at getting people skilled in any form, because we believe that it takes, like what Fannie was saying, right? It takes a village to raise just one individual. Imagine if we are talking about a change in communities throughout the region. So yeah, any skills can be contributed and are highly valued, because even though you may think that a particular skill or a particular experience may be small, one drop of water actually creates an entire ocean. Similarly, one stone, if you just throw it into the pond, it creates a ripple that grows far and wide from the initial point of impact. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel, for the sharing. So I think something that really caught my attention was the genuine smiles from these children in the photo shown. So one thing that I'll probably take away is actually, like what Gabriel shared, will our system of money actually really destroy the smiles of the photo that you actually seen and his sharing. And who are we to say that what is poverty, or who defines poverty? We are just mainly defining poverty because of the social construct that our past and previous generations have actually defined us. With that, thank you everyone, and thanks for the speakers for sharing. We'll now move on to our Q&A session. With that, we'll invite all the speakers once again to come on screen, where they will be answering the questions which have been raised on our Instagram page leading up to the huddle. We'll kick off the Q&A session with just perhaps opening the floor to just saying, poverty can be elevated through policies in a top-down approach. But how then do we go about reducing the prejudice and the stereotypes labeled onto those suffering from poverty? Maybe you can start off with Juliana.
I guess it's really, like what I said previously, really understanding what value they place in society and what can they offer. Because even them, being in menial jobs in their lives, they still have value that they can share and insights that they can share with us, be it their mistakes in life, like what Harry said about, someone who's coping with addiction, someone who's coping with the anger management issues. These are the things that they can share with people as well. So I guess when we look at people in poverty, it's very, very important to really think about what is the value that they bring and really think hard. Because if we don't have an answer to that, then we don't have the right to help people, because we don't, it's just perpetuating the learned helplessness in people.
Anybody wants to add on to what Juliana shared?
I can comment a little bit here. I think if you look at ground-up approaches to poverty, I think what you guys are doing is essentially the right step, right, to elevating poverty from the ground. And I think Fannie mentioned it, even Juliana as well, that we need volunteers on the ground, and this goes not just for women, elderly, and all that stuff. Even for homeless people, volunteers play a huge role in actually creating a community for people. And when we look at elevating poverty on the ground, I think we need to also focus on the idea of community, creating a community for people, so that they have this community to rely on. And what does that kind of community look like?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think being one of the richest nation in, being where we are right now, I think in Asia, okay, I'm not an academia like Dr. Harry here, but so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were like the second most unequal nation or something like that in Asia. So there's a lot of inequality. Just now I mentioned very briefly, and I think when you talk about top-down approaches, usually they will need to address it in a very equal manner. So like the most recent budgets that you hear, and the announcements and the handouts being given out, the government needs to give out things like equal. So everybody get 300. But the 300 to you and me and the 300 given to someone from a low-income family would mean very different. And that's why, it's great that some of our own fellow countrymen have said, we will give this back, we will donate this to a charity, we will just give away that money that was given. So that is the equality portion. Top down, usually they will mete out some measures, but usually it has to be like that. Equity, okay, this sounds a bit like a social service type of lecture as well. Equity is where, ground-ups like you, bamboo builders, or even Juliana, or even ourselves, we are trying to do, creating customized tools so that people can sort of have a bit more of a level playing field and not so be disadvantaged, when it comes to, so very recent example, again, the home-based learning, how to achieve home-based learning if I don't even have access to a laptop, right? So that's why you see, suddenly all the laptops, donations come in, and all the families, the government is just trying to address some of these inequalities by giving out such access to resources. But I think when we want to create a society that, with the very beautiful term of justice, that is when everybody plays a part. you want to talk about government, you want to talk about grown-ups. That's where everybody and academics like Dr. Harry here, he raises awareness. He creates public knowledge sharing through his through public knowledge and understanding through his sharing. So I think so it really is a question of what type of societies do we want to create in Singapore, and then that will determine the efforts that we need to put in.
Yeah, I agree with Fannie also in that both a top-down as well as bottom-up approach is needed. So for a top-down approach, like in terms of our education system needs to educate our students, our next generation, to be more aware of such issues around and to take action about it, towards it. Then as for the ground-up movements, it has to be, I think ground-up movements tend to be more decentralized, and because of that, then they're better able to cater to the customized needs of the various beneficiaries. Unlike a top-down approach, like what Fannie mentioned, it's quite difficult to to be able to collect that kind of data and to provide a customized solution to the few million people living in Singapore. So maybe in the future with big data and with technology, then that may be doable, hopefully. So but then I think in the meantime, both top-down approach as well as a bottom-up approach needs to work together.
Thanks for sharing. I think another question also popped up amongst the question bean that we had was seeing that everyone has such a diverse background, what is one of the most life-changing experiences you have had in your work that you believe others can learn from? Maybe you can get Fannie to start the ball rolling first.
I'm sorry, I need to throw the ball because I do need to think about it. So if the other speakers can help me out here.
It's a tough question, isn't it? Maybe I'll just share an experience. I mean, I guess that I think when I met Ganesh at that open air pavilion, I think the lesson that I learned there is one about treating people with dignity, and also the fact that we are all by and large connected to. I mean, we are individuals, but we are not alone in our society. And I think that's a very important lesson that people are not. We live in a society. We don't live alone, but yet if you look at the type of society that we have in Singapore and the kind of living arrangement, you find that there are a lot of people who are alone. And the human touch is important. Here I deviate from the academic. I mean, talking about academics and all that stuff, but really, I mean, if you think about just that phone call and hearing a familiar voice over the phone for Ganesh, and how he was so touched just to hear the voice of someone who cared, I think that is inspiring. That is a lesson in itself for me.
Okay, I thought of something. Thank you, Harry, for being the first. I think strange. I mean, there are many inspiring encounters, and that's why it is a bit difficult to jog up the memory. But I would like to share actually more of a simulation experience and my own personal reflection of it. So at DOT, one of the things we do as part of our CCA is to conduct poverty simulation exercises for our volunteers, for people who wants to come on board into the community before extending help. And I think it was when I went through it and I realized that that's when it really sunk in, that if I was placed in that similar situation, I would not. So I'm making better choices, not because I'm smarter, not because I am I am more capable. I'm making better choices. A lot of it is because I have the privilege to do so, or I have the means and the access to the opportunity to do so as well. So in that poverty, in the poverty simulation exercise that I went through, this was several years ago. I think I went home that day quite sobered up, because you realize that, hey, you're better off. It's as though I'm trying to help the people who are poor and lesser in that sense. But actually, if I was placed in the exact situation, I may make the same decisions, similar decisions, and it will just be a spiral downwards. Yeah, so that was for me quite an impactful experience. Thank you.
I guess, thank you, Fannie and Harry. I think you shared very, very important examples of self-mastery, emotional health, and even learning from the people that we serve, be it, simple things like their resilience. So for me, for what I've learned that is really inspiring is really when I was working with the facilitators project, the kids from the shelter. So there was one kid that was really a troublemaker. Nobody will ever want to leave her alone with anybody else. Like, you leave her alone in school near a pond, then you come back and you will see all the fishes all die inside the pond. So she was quite a handful, and she had to spend some weekends with me because she needs some kind of stable guidance from someone. And when she stayed with me, I did some personal development with her. I showed her examples of people who are inspiring others. I helped her to learn, I teach her about meditation and how she can create her own meditation. Then there was once where she was in the car with me, and we were driving quite slowly because it was in the middle of night and visibility wasn't good. Then we came across 3 men who are kind of rough handling a woman, and they were like pulling the woman back, and the woman was crying. So we stopped the car and we told the 3 guys off and to back off, and we asked the woman to hop into our car just for her safety. So in our car, she was crying all the way, and this girl that was sitting in my car, this troublemaker, she actually started meditating, teaching the lady to meditate, to close her eyes, think of a party, who will you invite. And she really bring the woman through the whole experience to really uplift her. And this is a girl that never listens to other people. And really, when we look at her at first, we think that she might be poverty in terms of material needs, in terms of having a home. But really, like what Harry and Fannie said, it might easily be a poverty of love, poverty of self-mastery skills. And when we equip them with such things, it was amazing because within, I think, a few months, she actually won the best the most compassionate award in her school. And that was a huge turn from being such a troublemaker where nobody listens to her and has no friends. So yeah, all of us are in a position where we can influence someone.
I think another lesson to draw from that is that whatever you see now, it may not be what is eventually the future outcome, right? Yeah. So I think this point is also quite apparent in one of I think 2018 when we in Vietnam. So we actually left Vietnam already after starting up the business, and we moved to Myanmar because our idea of sustainability and empowerment is that, after going there, we will expose them to different alternative mindsets that are like social entrepreneurial mindsets, equip them with the skills to start a business. Once it starts already, going quite stable already, then we move on. So to allow them to stand on their own 2 feet. And once we moved on, the business actually just died. So we were a bit discouraged and very, very discouraged, and counted it as a lost cause, as a lesson learned. But actually, 1 year later, I think the ground needed to lie fallow for a while. So they started self-organizing again. So the students actually organized themselves together to form different groups to replicate the program that we have done together with them. But now they did it all on their own, And we actually weren't even aware until they took pictures, put it on Facebook. And then we saw that, hey, how come you all meet again? So, we wanted to do something together for the community. So they actually came together to start this e-commerce business again, new and improved now, with like a logo and everything. And then the proceeds from this business, that was during Christmas time. So then they wanted to write cards to show love to the orphans in a nearby orphanage. So the cost, the cost for all these cards and the mailing and the delivery of the gifts will come from the profits that they earn from this business. So then that was a really exciting night for me, because for a whole year I thought that the previous year has been a waste and it didn't result in anything. But sometimes, especially in terms of skills and mindset change, we need to look at the long term and be patient, and probably also to trust them that they know what's good for themselves. Yeah, a lot of times in our society we expect everything to be instant, like instant noodles, like microwaves. But yeah, so people, we take some time to internalize, and then it's really quite inspiring to see them stand up on their feet.
Thanks for sharing. I think whenever you all shared something, there are really a lot of things that we can learn. So I hope that as individuals like us, we can use this as a learning point to step out and then start helping people start helping people also. So now that actually there's some learning points, I think there are also some obstacles that you all face while interacting with them, with the beneficiaries. So what are some obstacles and challenges that you all faced?
For me, I can give an example, a very funny example, because I always think about empowering versus helping, right? So there was once where we tried to do a project where we want to empower the seniors to make choices. So we thought, it's not as simple as just giving them things, because when we just give them things and then they take it for granted, then they will just have this learned helplessness where they just receive and they cannot give out. So instead of that, we thought of getting them to make choices. So we think of an auction concept, where we bring all the gifts that we bring, really a lot of stuff, and all kinds of gifts that we can think of. And then we get the seniors in the shelter, in the home, to auction and bid for all these things. And then we have mahjong chips where they can use the chips and they can do activities, and then they can earn the chips. So it's like a form of empowerment where they can earn it, and then they can bid for all the stuff that they want. And then when it comes to bidding, it was so chaotic. Everybody was bidding at the same time, and the seniors got angry when we award some of the stuff to the winner. Then they said, not fair, everything is not fair. And then it is funny because sometimes people in that position, they have very tunnel vision. They have a lack mentality where everything is scarce. So they hold on to things like they can never, because they have this mentality that they can never have it again, or they won't have ever enough. So they may not seem as receptive to being nice, or even giving them options. They will ruin it by quarreling and fighting, and we have to stop the auction early and then hide all the other gifts that are remaining, and then the kids have to come in and pacify them, sing songs, make them happy. And that was a disaster in a way, because we tried to empower them, but at the same time not really understanding that they have this sense of entitlement, especially among people who have always been at the end of receiving, and they don't know how they can be of value. So then it leads to the question of doing it step by step, and really introducing to them concepts such as self-mastery, emotional intelligence, things like that. So yeah, that's my story.
Okay, I can go next. I think the key obstacle or the key challenge that I face with long-term homelessness, or I speak here as an academic as well as a volunteer, is that it is a very complex issue. I'll give you an example. I also volunteered in Melbourne when I was doing my PhD, and I remember going out with the Salvation Army, and we went to under a very huge bridge in Melbourne, and there was this homeless guy and it was very bad. He was sleeping among a lot of champagne bottles. Of course, they are all empty. And the feces and the urine were just all around and everything. So, and he also suffered from very poor mental health. So I asked the volunteer at that time, hey, why don't we bring this guy in to, some shelter or into, for help, somewhere for help. So the volunteer answered me and said that, yeah, we've been working with him, but he's not ready. This issue of being not ready is something that I grapple with, and a lot of volunteers here in Singapore grapple with as well. When do we know a person is ready? I think the underlying issue here at hand is this, that we do need more expert knowledge when we cope with the complexity of homelessness, things like addiction, things like poor mental health. Not many volunteers are trained in such things. So every time when we go, especially for outreach group, we don't really know how to handle the more complex issues of long-term homelessness. And short of saying that, people choose to sleep outside, as well as, that they refuse government help, there is an underlying more complex problem that has to be resolved first before we assume that. So that is one of the key challenges that I can think of.
Okay, I'll go next. So as I mentioned, we work a lot with women, and one of the major barriers of women entering the workforce or re-entering the workforce has to do with caregiving. So that means that sustained employment. So to get into employment is one thing. So it's very interesting, if you want, for example, if you want access to childcare, you've got to be in a job. But if you don't get a job, it's like, if I don't get the childcare, how do I get into a job lah? So it's like how is this going to work, right? So there are barriers that part. The motivation to work is also another part, whereby if I work and then I still get 1,300 or 1,400, almost close to what I will get on financial assistance. Where is the incentivization to work, right? Or to continue working, because it takes a lot more to work, to make arrangements for my kids to be cared for, the moral strength to sort of come back to work, to put yourself out there. And then you don't see any savings increase over time. And then suddenly your previously you had rental subsidy, but then because you work now, you do not have rental subsidy anymore. So it's a lot of then you don't get this, you don't get that. Things get taken away a bit more than it is given to you. I think recently there was also an article that talked about how, or was it a debate in Parliament? I can't remember, sorry. But about how we are not valuing the essential workers like cleaners and all that, because they're still getting lower wages as compared to the rest of society. So these are the kind of mindsets that we have to deal with for the women when we bridge them to employment. We ourselves find it hard to answer, what is the incentives to work, right? And of course, for them, they also face that barrier to sustain the employment, because I mentioned all these challenges. I mean, for example, if I am rostered in shifts and then my children fall sick, again, my children might be placed in childcare. So, but then once they get fever or whatever, they got to come home. Who takes care of them, right? I've got to drop shifts for that day, do it for a few days. Either my supervisors are not happy, my colleagues are not happy, or I'm not happy with myself for letting my boss down, whatever that is. So these will be the two key areas that is a challenge for us.
I think it's quite a difficult question, because I think so it requires some thought. I think for us, it's in dealing with multiple stakeholders with different interests. Yeah, so in some of the countries that we've been in, we've had to cooperate with local organizations that had particular authority in the area that we were working with. So sometimes they have their own interests, like power, or maybe it's so sometimes they because we are foreigners and we need their their authority, we need their approval to operate in that area, we find ourselves in a powerless position to their demands. So sometimes their demands is not always in favor of the beneficiaries. It's quite self-seeking sometimes, and we are caught in a position between satisfying them versus the main task that we came in to do, which is really for the beneficiaries, right? So it was a little difficult in navigating the local politics in the area. Yeah, so I think that was one challenge that we face in dealing with overseas beneficiaries. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I think that, all of you all have actually many ups and downs. So to sum up the whole Q&A session, what keeps you motivated to continue doing what you are doing in maybe one sentence? Maybe you can start with Gabriel.
Wow, one sentence. I think for me it's the what keeps me motivated is the picture of the little girl that got me started, which was actually my first encounter in poverty, right? Which is a girl eating rice off the sand. So sometimes it gets difficult, right? But then if you know that you have an opportunity to reduce the number of such instances occurring, and you know that every step that you take brings you nearer to that goal, then yeah, that helps in terms of pushing forward in persevering to progress. Yeah.
I can go in one sentence. I think people's stories, especially people's stories who are not heard, and telling them keeps me motivated.
I guess for me, it's really being in the energy of possibility and really being creative and creating the future that we want, the kind of society that we want, and being optimistic about it.
Okay, I gotta think one sentence. That doesn't count, yeah. I believe that it is more than human rights. I think it's human responsibility to bring justice to society. I once asked my kid, I said, when you make a donation to a charity, is that an act of charity or is that an act of justice? I left him there with the question, but personally, I think that's my goal, to achieve justice in society.
Thanks for sharing and thanks for the one sentence which keeps you motivated. So with that, we have come to the end of the huddle. We thank you for the questions that you have dropped us in our question box on Instagram or our comments page below. We hope that you have actually enjoyed all the insightful sharings from our speakers today. I think all of you have actually touched on important issues of the social lens about poverty that we as Singaporeans might not be aware or exposed or even think about from the various perspectives that you have shared. Once again, we'd like to thank all our speakers for the time. Ms. Juliana Johan, co-founder of the Affirmative People. Dr. Harry Tan, researcher and sociologist presenting on elderly homelessness in Singapore. Next, Ms. Fannie Lim, Deputy Executive Director of Daughters of Tomorrow. And finally, Mr. Gabriel Tan, founders of Bamboo Builders. Last but not least, before we close the sharing session, we would like to thank a few people, our partners for unwavering support, family and friends who have been supporting us ever since Bamboo Builders started, Wei Yang and the team for organizing the whole event, and lastly, it's you, people who are watching this video. Thank you for actually taking time off to join us in our event. We thank your presence and your interest in wanting to learn more about the issues surrounding poverty. Our community huddles are held every quarterly, with the next one coming up on the 15th of August, Saturday. Stay tuned for more updates on our Facebook and Instagram page at Bamboo Builders. If you haven't already followed us, do follow us for more information. Grow fast and grow strong, and thank you.
Hi everybody, it's me again. So I just want to thank you all for joining our huddle. I hope that you have learned quite a lot from the stories of our panelists. I think they also quite enjoyed themselves. So moving on, if you have further questions for our panelists, please feel free to post your questions in the comments below, and then join our Telegram channel. Just search Bamboo Builders on Telegram, where the answers from our panelists will then be posted up on our Telegram channel. Yep, so join us. Next, I also just want to say that Bamboo Builders as a social enterprise has always been community driven. It has always, and we are very thankful for our community who has been supporting us all the way since our inception, all the way until now. We would never have gotten to where we are without your contributions. So on this topic of contributions, we were actually thinking of a more efficient way in terms of mobilizing resources to channel it into into our beneficiaries. So we actually created a Google form, which you can see in the link below. So I really hope that you'll be able to click on it and just look through it. We welcome resources in any way, whether it's in terms of time, whether in terms of just connections with other people, whether in terms of monetary donations. Yeah, so in terms of the first two, which I was talking about, in terms of time as well as connections, we are starting a new project actually in terms of pre-incubating new social enterprises, in terms of and provide them mentorship and whatever resources they may need in order for them to survive the first 1 to 2 years of their growth. As we all know, the first few years of a social enterprise's inception is critically important for its survival for the long run. So as a community, we hope to be there for them, to support them through the first few years of their inception. So just want to thank you all for tuning in. So please leave your comments below, as well as fill in the link if you want to contribute to our community. Thank you. Bye.